Welcome back to beyoungministry.blogspot.com, to another blog and another podcast out of the Gospel according to Luke. Today we're in Luke chapter 9, verses 44 through 45, which reads, "Listen carefully to what I am about to say to you. The Son of Man is going to be delivered into the hands of men." But they did not understand what this meant. It was hidden from them, so that they did not grasp it, and they were afraid to ask him about it. That's Luke chapter 9, verses 44 and 45. Our text for today begins with, "Listen carefully to what I am about to tell you. The Son of Man is going to be delivered into the hands of men." The Lord Jesus knew that listening is one of the easiest things we will ever do, and yet one of the hardest. It seemed most hard for the disciples, so the Lord made it a point for them to tell them to listen. In a sense, listening is easy, or hearing is easy. It doesn't demand the initiative and energy required in speaking. That's why faith comes from hearing, and hearing through the Word of Christ. The point is that hearing is easy, and faith is not an expression of our activity, but our receiving the activity of another, of the Lord Himself. It is hearing with faith that accents the achievements of Christ, and thus is the channel of His grace that starts and sustains the Christian life. But despite this ease, or perhaps precisely because of it, we often fight against it. In our sin, we'd rather trust in ourselves than another, amass our own righteousness than receive another's, speak our own thoughts than listen to someone else's. True, sustained, active listening is a great act of faith and a great means of grace, both for ourselves and for others, for other Christians that we're involved with. After the transfiguration on the mountain, just when the disciples thought the Lord Jesus was about to set up His kingdom, He says, the Son of Man is going to be delivered into the hands of men. Delivered means handed over as a criminal to those who would punish Him. He was saying, I'm going to suffer, and you too are going to have to deny yourselves, take up your cross as well. There's going to be suffering for you. The disciples didn't hear it. It didn't register. They didn't hear the part about the cross. They just looked at the crown. They saw the glory and not the suffering. Even though the Lord Jesus had already told them back in Luke chapter 9, verse 22, the Son of Man must suffer many things and be rejected by the elders and chief priests and scribes and be murdered, be raised up the third day. It still had not sunk in. It just didn't compute in the minds of the disciples. And so it was necessary for Him to say to them, listen carefully to what I'm about to tell you. And another translation of this verse reads, let these words sink into your ears. I like that. In addition to what had happened on the Mount of Transfiguration, the disciples were excited by the rising popularity of the Lord Jesus. The populace exacerbated their expectations that He would establish His kingdom then and there. As you already know, the theme of Luke's gospel is the Lord Jesus is the Son of Man. Taken from Daniel 7, the designation is that of a very exalted figure. A study of the term Son of Man in the Gospels reveals the Lord Jesus referred himself most often as the Son of Man. He said in Mark 10:45, "The Son of Man came not to be served, but to serve and to give his life as a ransom for many." The Lord Jesus was subtle while enabling others to recognize his identity. But he didn't reveal himself so blatantly that everybody would come to accept him as the king. He made claims that were explicit in certain settings and implicit in others. And only when the time was right, when he was on trial for his life, that he was asked, "Are you the Christ, the Son of the living God?" In response, he said, "I am, and you will see the Son of Man coming with great power and glory." So the Lord Jesus confessed his deity openly, right at the point when he knew he would be crucified for it. The Lord Jesus is referred to as the Son of Man 88 times in the New Testament. The phrase Son of Man is a reference to the prophecy of Daniel 7:13 and 14, which reads, "In my vision at night I looked, and there before me was one like a Son of Man, coming with the clouds of heaven. He approached the Ancient of Days and was led into his presence. He was given authority, glory, and sovereign power. All nations and people of every language worshipped him. His dominion is an everlasting dominion that will not pass away, and his kingdom is one that will never be destroyed." Daniel's description of the Son of Man is messianic. The disciples, on the heels of his transfiguration, expected the Lord Jesus to set up his eternal kingdom on earth as the Son of Man. This expectation was created by the fact that he used this phrase of himself most often. God called the prophet Ezekiel Son of Man 93 times. God was simply calling Ezekiel a human being. A son of a man is a son of a man. He's a man. The Lord Jesus was fully God and he was fully human. But according to Luke 9:45, the disciples did not understand what this meant. It was hidden from them so that they did not grasp it. The disciples didn't understand how this could take place in the context of God's plan for the Messiah. If the Lord Jesus was the Messiah, how could he be delivered into the hands of men and be put to death? The disciples didn't understand because it was concealed from them so that they might not perceive it. Now, God wasn't the one that was hiding it. No, they themselves were the guilty. In Luke 8:10, we learn that the reason the disciples were able to know the secrets of the kingdom was because they were seeking. The crowd did not come to the Lord and ask him to explain the parable of the soils, but the disciples did. Since they were asking and seeking, the Lord Jesus revealed to them the meaning of the parable. Luke 9:45 reads, "They were afraid to ask him about this saying." You see, the disciples stopped asking for explanations. Before, when the Lord Jesus said something they did not understand, they went to him and asked him. Now, the disciples have stopped asking. Since they stopped asking, they could not understand what the Lord Jesus meant. My friends, I trust this podcast and this blog are helping you in your walk with the Lord. If I can be of further assistance to you, shoot me an email at beyoungministry@gmail.com. Hey, have a great day.